I'm waiting for the prerequisite 30 seconds that I've now been told we need to wait to queue up the. There's a 30-second lead in now. So, Chair Metzen, would you like to start now?
Yes, I will call this meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock on the dot. And so first up on the docket, we have hearings and design advice for PC 16105.
Thank you. So today we're doing something a little bit different. Working with a property owner, they missed out on completing their application for the October meeting, just barely. So we moved forward and noticed their application for November, but we included a design advice for this month. And I think as I move forward with the PowerPoint, you'll understand why I kind of wanted to do this approach of allowing us to kind of work through some of the issues, taking public comment because we are kind of in the noticed hearing, and then kind of being able to give the applicant some additional advice and direction. And so if there needs to be some revisions to the application in time for the November meeting, there can be. Because of timing issues and putting things on in the newspaper, not getting on the October meeting could have potentially moved the design advice to November and then the actual application to January. So we're trying to try a sample option of going design advice month 1 and the application month 2. Mm-hmm. So this is an application for new construction in Kenema. So I'll go through the PowerPoint presentation I have that brings up the applicant's proposal and some issues in the design guidelines. And then we'll have the applicant come up and speak, and then we'll open up the hearing for public comments. And then tonight, the board really has no deliberation, just individual direction they might want to give back to the applicant. Okay. So this is a lot like the application we saw last month. It is for 2 lots of record. That is putting together for a 10,000 square foot lot on the downslope part of 4th Avenue. You can see the subject site right here. It's kind of right at the intersection of 4th and Miller. Here is a contour map of the site. You can kind of see it's pretty much the same contour moving down the hill. A lot of benches to it. The Google Maps can really lays out the foliage that is at 4th Avenue. So this is looking south at 4th. Miller Street is up at the top of the rise there. And this is at Miller Street looking north. So the site is a little bit past these kind of invasive bush trees. This is on 3rd Avenue looking up the hill, and the kind of dense trees right here above this house is about where the lot is, just to give you some context. So the applicant is proposing a new single-family house. This shows kind of a small driveway going down with a kind of a 3-point turn car park area in the right-of-way. So a lot like the past applications, taking advantage of the existing unbuilt right-of-way of 4th, and then really having the house be as close to the property line as they possibly can. Because that rest of the part of the 4th Avenue is heading on down the hill. This shows the applicant's front elevation and rear elevation. In this proposal, there is actually an enclosed breezeway that actually I'll show in the separate application, separate slide, that it continues down below the into the basement floor. This shows the side elevations. Here is some floor plans. So you see here we have the front porch into the great room, and then this connector piece to the garage. As you move downstairs in the basement room, there is a kind of a guest room that goes into a bathroom. So this is that kind of the ground floor part of that connector piece of the breezeway. So I had met with the applicant previously and brought up some of the issues that I saw. Just to lay out some of the design guidelines, this is attempting to look at a vernacular design. as we say in the design guidelines, you should be siting your house to the extent as you can to take advantage of existing topography, especially south of 3rd, which is what this area is. If you look at 3rd being to the river being north and south being away from the river. Not surprisingly, we're still having questions about how to interpret our breezeway design guidelines. It does say here that breezeways and covered walkways provide shelter links between buildings and accessory structures, and they can provide access to or separation from buildings as a means for reducing large building masses and to promote use of accessory buildings. And specifically, use of breezeways or covered walkways south of 3rd is Historic Review Board approval. So really looking at the specific design in this situation, has the applicant created too substantial of a breezeway? Building form for the design composition. The thing that I most initially looked at was the additional kind of basement volume. So if you're looking here under building form, it has maximum height 1.5 stories, and that's kind of the above part. It does allow a basement option for vernacular and Kenema. But if you look, as you get into the design guidelines that look at height, talks about principles of height, and onto the right under not allowed, it does say residential buildings that vary more than 20% from height of the historic neighborhood context buildings unless approved by the HRB, and Kenema residential greater than 1.5 story maximum height plus basement. The last thing I wanted to show was under volumes. Is this too large of a volume? So those were kind of the design guidelines sections that I saw were the most directly addressed this application. As regards to some of the design elements being a little bit more Queen Anne than vernacular, we had some of that initial, but I think those are kind of more design details where, to me, on a staff level, the worry that I had was the massing. And the design guidelines pretty much say that, a daylight basement or a basement is allowed, but in this circumstance, chasing the hillside, you have a whole other kind of open storage area below the basement. And so with this massing, even though the house is not particularly that big, if you look at that square footage of the square, coming as it's chasing down the house, does it meet the design guidelines? Is this situation unique, or the applicant is doing the best that he possibly could for this situation, or are there alternatives to this proposed design that could still be built on this slope of the lot? The geologic hazards, which is not different than other applications, is a bifurcated process. The applicant will be submitting a geologic hazards application to the city. It's a type 2 notice staff decision that's appealable to the city commission, and they do know that any revisions on the from the geologic hazards that impact the historic review, they will have to come back and receive a refinement. And so the applicant is looking for, really at this time, some additional massing comments, citing comments to help move forward with the geologic hazards review, and then as we move forward, getting down to some more of the design details. Does anybody have any questions before I send it to the applicant?
No. Does anyone else?
Oh, shoot, sorry.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a particularly deep house, so I mean, like it's
26 feet than the deck. Yeah, it's not very deep.
so the slope of the site is really the
Pretty substantial.
Work around.
We can have the applicant come up.
Yeah, I'll invite the applicant up. Please state your name and address for the record.
Robert D. Green, go by Dave, my middle name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Robert, would you mind sitting down and doing that into the mic?
It's Robert D. Green, go by my middle name Dave, so when you hear Dave and Robert, it's the same.
Okay.
You want me to just kind of summarize?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you can start.
Um,
Get back to it.
I am a building contractor since 1973. This particular project, the intention is not a commercial venture. It's retirement home for myself is my goal. Kind of got intrigued when I just kind of drove through the neighborhood by chance, which I've done occasionally over the years and saw this property for sale, and it's obviously challenging property, but was intrigued by the neighborhood and the possibilities there, and so I did enter into a pre-construction conference before I actually made an offer on the lot, just to find out if the lot was actually even buildable, what the constraints would be, and so forth, knowing that obviously there's topographical and a number of challenges on the lot. But the result of the pre-construction or pre-application conference was that yes, it is buildable property. The two lots were for sale individually, and they advised that because they were contiguous ownership, that only one building could be built on there. So I alerted the realtor to let the seller know that if they sell one or the other, the other lot would not be buildable, and so offered to purchase both lots, and ultimately did do that based on the fact that it appeared that it would be a buildable lot. So my design efforts to start with, before I had fully the CONEMA guidelines and so forth, obviously was to keep a small footprint, trying to, because of the topography and the construction constraints. And then as I reviewed the CONEMA guidelines, tweaked some, and with some guidance from Christina as far as ornamentation and so forth, tried to bring it as much as possible into conformity with the guidelines. Recognizing, and I do have a design narrative that's part of my application, which you may have available to you, that kind of describes the design process or how I got to that, so you can review that at another time. But basically, in short, was not fully aware. I'd heard, I guess anecdotally, some that there was consideration of breezeways. That is one issue that may be of concern. And I honestly didn't see the notice about breezeways. In fact, I looked through the CONEMA guidelines again tonight before I came, and I don't see that actually in there. Maybe in another different part of the design code or something like that, the breezeway aspect of it. That is, I noted that the Captain Miller House has that type of a breezeway, so that's one of the historic buildings. It does have that type of a connection. One thing that is kind of crucial in keeping the footprint small is the lower level obviously has more square footage for 3 bedrooms than we're in need of on the main floor. So separating those becomes kind of problematic. Either have a separated guest suite, which we would rather have them contained, but then also as you get a chance to look at the plan, you'll realize that the flow with stairways and so forth is utilizing that for stairway access. So it would probably require a larger footprint to eliminate the breezeway or the connecting element there, just to simply get adequate room sizes and so forth. And the goal, obviously, from my perspective, and I'm sure the neighborhoods too, is to keep it as conservative as possible. So that's kind of addressing that aspect. There at one point had been a suggestion to go to a 12-12 roof. I'm fine with that. I contemplated possibly going 12-12. Don't really need that much volume, but that might be slightly more appropriate for the vernacular design, and that would be fine. Subsequent to my initial, the little rendering you saw first did not show exactly this front elevation, because subsequent to that I spotted the Coburn House, and I had seen this shouldered trim, exterior trim, actually up in Washington in a old military historical area, and was kind of intrigued, and I saw that there, and so subsequently incorporated that in my preferred front elevation there, using the shouldered trim on the windows on just the front elevation only, and then kind of a pedimented trim on all the other windows, which does not show on those side and rear elevations because that decision was subsequent. But ultimately trying to utilize the vernacular design. The siding would be the 105 pattern Dutch lap, they call it, or a cove channel siding, which is most typical for that vernacular style, either in fiber cement or cedar. It was available in fiber cement. Right now, it's not. So, whether or not it comes back available, I would prefer fiber cement just for fire and moisture resistance and durability and so forth. But the other products are listed in kind of in summary in my narrative too. So that's probably kind of an overview of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We can ask questions to the applicant?
Yeah, and then at some point we do public.
Okay, good. Let's start down at the end. Claire?
Mike? It's interesting the treatment of the shoulder thing on the windows. And you said you've seen it in other
It's a
vernacular?
little unique. Yeah, the Coburn House down on McLaughlin
How's
at
that?
the I guess that would be the west end of town. It's kind of interesting. The river makes a turn there. When I looked at the lot, I thought it was kind of looking west, but you're looking more north as you view the river in that case. So.
And I appreciate you using some of the, design elements, but it definitely has the look of, a new, a new structure. And I know that you're dealing with, I don't even know if am I on?
Yep.
Oh.
You were.
Worse.
There you go.
If you have the, and I don't know if you have a copy of the design narrative, but there is a picture of the Coburn House. There.
Right.
Yep, we have
Oh,
it.
now I can. Whoa.
There we go.
But I know the topography definitely limits you as, that's the challenge that you're dealing with. But, the back of the house is not viewed from, too much of it is viewed from the street, correct?
You see that, and there's actually a picture also in my design narrative from Third, looking up 410 Third Street is basically directly behind that. So you're kind of looking up through the trees, and there are sight lines that are a little hard to see when you see the side elevations, showing what the sight line would be from the rear property line and also from 3rd Street, the shallower lines being from 3rd Street. And I asked my designer to include those because I'm aware of the fact that the rear window treatment there with the gentle arch is a little bit out of character perhaps, with the true vernacular design. The reality is that you really won't see it because you can see the deck rim, then the rails obscured. So you actually, from either of those perspectives, would not even see the windows. You would see the porch ceiling and the deck ceilings. And I did make some comment about those. My intention was the lower deck, even though that will drain through, is to use a slatted 1x3 to kind of mimic the tongue and groove ceiling of the other two porches, so you don't actually see deck framing per se. Try to obscure that so you see a more finished appearance from below. But it is heavily vegetated, so particularly in the winter, it's obscured.
You're next.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant?
So we saw on that Christina presented a topographic. It looks like the original, like the drawing has topo lines on it, but they're not showing. Or is it
They're pretty faint on the plot plan, but they are reflected there. All the contour lines that were off the city's maps. So
I'm just wondering how the parking and driveway configuration, if that has impacted the slope of the site at all, and by having all that, has it increased the visibility of the back of the structure? So if you were to draw a section through the site as is, and then a section through the structure
where
as
that
proposed.
comes, if we could go to the side elevations, the contour lines are fairly parallel to Fourth, so it's, as you view it through the, for instance, the right elevation there, the street is ascending, you know, as you move in that direction. So the grade gets up higher there. The hammerhead on the parking will have to be retained in some form. And actually, I had a question regarding that. I noticed at some point in some of the design guidelines that they say that gabons aren't allowed, and it's kind of interesting to me because I figured that might be an ideal place maybe for some gabons because you can get vines growing so quickly on them and pretty much completely obscure them. But you know, ultimately that would be more of the site design we'd have to flesh out once we get a civil engineer involved. And we get past, you might say, our initial building form and establish for sure what that's going to be. But it is tight, you know, that is kind of a major intersection for the little neighborhood. So, you know, just to find an extra place to park and a single garage is the challenge that I'm trying to address there.
Okay. And we're going to have to hear from some neighborhood folks as well. So if we could abbreviate the answers just a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. I am curious how much you're bringing the front elevation of the house up. So how much is the actual grade rising to get the ground floor where you need it?
I do have assumed floor elevations, and he actually did not quite change those. My intention was that the main floor would be about 1.5 feet above street level, straight back at the porch, because I was going to try to get a little fall to a catch basin.
At the street?
Yeah, I'm planning that we'll need to capture some of the street water, because street water at this point actually kind of runs off onto that property and probably to the adjoining property, and so part of our development will be to try to intercept some of that storm water as well as our own.
Okay, so that was
So
my
we
assumption.
will be a little bit above street level.
Okay. My concern with that is I believe that's driving the house upwards and creating this difficulty with the basement below the basement, or the the cripple walls
Yep.
that happen below the basement.
Mhm.
And so you will see comments from the board on that item.
Okay.
I think it would be better to pull the house back down
Mhm.
so you don't have that conflict. I think it'll be an easier discussion to have, as well as once we get to the back of the house,
Mhm.
if you were to do some more retainage with a rockery wall or something of that nature, that would bring the grade up even more, so that we're not we have significantly less cripple wall below that basement.
Mhm.
Now, it may not make sense that basement is a slab on grade, but as close to it as you could get, I would suggest that you consider that. I don't think that the overall building is oversized for the neighborhood or inappropriate. Really, it's a pretty modest house. It looks like a very nice house in many respects. Something to consider is perhaps, as we're talking about massing, because that's really what we're hitting on today, is pulling the great room portion, that main section, towards the street slightly. Without affecting your plan much, that would give you a much needed jog between the great room and the garage where you're connecting through the breezeway. If that bathroom didn't connect directly over to the back of the garage, I think you would have a more compelling massing from the back side.
Okay, so splitting it at between the garage and the breezeway, and bringing the breezeway and the house portion forward. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. The enclosed breezeway isn't overly wide or long between the house and the garage when you're looking at the street, and you have a fairly low slope roof there, so your roofs aren't competing, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing here. The back deck, to go back to the back of the house, I would argue that I would imagine you would see those upper windows, and it appears that the roof on that back deck is curved. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Which I would encourage you to find some strong precedent or change it.
Fine, what now?
Some strong precedents in the neighborhood of where you're pulling from for that design
The
element,
curve? Okay,
or change it. One of the two.
okay.
I would really like to see your dreams fulfilled in your retirement home, but I don't have the authority to approve something
Sure.
that I can't approve.
Yeah.
Or at least vote that way. You know, there's
Sure.
many of us here. So just bring that out, okay? But if you were to have square windows that perhaps came up in the center that worked as
Step formation as opposed to the arch, then maybe?
yeah, in a way that they were relights above the center windows, you may have an easier time finding a precedent for that, or simply go to a Queen Anne, which this kind of looks like it wants to be.
Yeah, but Queen Anne's not a permitted
Oh,
design.
that's
It's
true.
not, no.
What? Yeah, it's mostly vernacular over there in Bungalow. So, I would like to give you better direction on that element, but I can't. If it was here in Oregon City proper,
Yeah.
but yeah. So, but going back to how you brought up the trim on the front, having the wings, similar to the other home that's closer to 99E. Thank you. I think that's an excellent step in arguing your point that this is an appropriate approach. So with that, Ken?
Question probably for Christina regarding the design elements on the Coburn house.
Mhm.
Do we know if those are original?
Good question. I was just about to bring up the Coburn.
We had the Oregon City commentary on that particular building, and there's some question if it was Coburn anyway.
Taller.
So no, I don't know.
Vegetation.
I don't know the providence of when that, and I can do a little research between now and the November meeting.
Okay.
I would appreciate that. I wouldn't want to recommend that we replicate design elements that are not part of the authentic or the original design.
I was in that house many, many years ago, and they had it was in pretty bad shape a long time ago, but they had restored it, and so we had an old home for me. I think it's probably, to me, just looking at the style and everything, that I don't think it's that out of the ordinary that it wouldn't be original.
Okay.
Anything else, Ken?
No, that was the only question I had that hadn't already been addressed.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Sure.
And with
Thank you.
that, we will invite up Howard Post. Okay.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
I don't think he heard.
Howard?
Good evening. Howard Post. I live in 302 Blanchard, Canela. Just a couple items to consider because it's your decision to do.
Mhm.
But One, the first one, it looks good, and I like his 12-12 pitch. That's more conforming with the neighborhood and the historic district. Number two, being it's a historic district, he might want to consider wood windows in the front versus vinyl or fiberglass or whatever it is, be it is a historic district. The back doesn't make much difference because you don't see them anyway, but it would be nice to just go with the flow. Thirdly, is the breezeway kind of throws it out of balance. I mean, it's a good-looking house, and it's fine, but he's pushing the mass, I think. The biggest concern is the water runoff down to Third, because we've had a trouble there before, and a couple of the rock walls have been washed out, and the city has to come in and rebuild them, and so that's a real concern, but he sounds like he's going to address that problem, but that is a really big concern. And then the steep slope is another thing, but that will come before you with the geotech and all this good stuff. But this is just some of the concerns with some of the people, because it is a historic district and it is a good-looking house, and we want to see new construction come in. Basically, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Howard. That was very productive. Anyone else? That was it. All right.
So this meeting will be up on video within about 2 days. So if you want, you can come back and
Okay, so
Yeah.
I should,
you can
all right.
bullet the items you hear,
Do
and
they-
I can send you a link of that.
do they-
Okay.
It'll be about 2 days
Supposed to
usually before it
have
gets
to
back.
testify.
No, we just had
Just the one? Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know if they knew.
Thank you, sir.
So with that, we can continue this application to the November meeting.
Okay. Do we need
So-
a motion to do that?
So moved.
Yes.
So
Second.
moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Okay. Clara Matt?
Aye.
Jonathan Stone?
Aye.
Ken Basinger?
Aye.
Chair Metzen?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to PC 16098, HR 1607, side and front addition to a locally designated landmark.
So this is a request for continuance. As you recall at the last meeting, the owners of the property on Hiram has quite a challenge on their hands. The board gave them some different direction about potentially either moving the existing historic house, repairing it, and then really focusing that house as an accessory building and moving forward for a new construction. They thought that was intriguing. They are still looking at different options, looking at the process of, do they mothball it, do they rehab it right now? So in the effort of them not quite finalizing their plans, they may end up just rehabbing the house right now, and it may stay at a staff level, or it may come back because 10% of their proposal couldn't be approved by staff. So in that, we are keeping their application open for the next month or two until they can figure out their next steps. So right now, at this time, I'd like to request the continuance to the November Historic Review Board meeting.
I move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Did you want to say something?
My question can wait till we.
Okay.
Sorry. Claire Met,
Aye.
Jonathan Stone,
Aye.
Ken Basinger,
Aye.
Chair Metzen.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And my question was the date of the November meeting,
It is the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week.
Oh,
22nd.
I will tell you
I
in
don't
just a
know if
moment.
I'm gonna be in town.
It is November 22nd.
Second.
I memorized my calendar. That's good. Okay, I can be here.
I'm impressed.
I may not be here. So, okay.
We will confirm
Okay.
quorum.
Yep.
So that is all I have tonight. We do have, under communications, we do have Trevor Martin, our new preservation planner, whose first day is Thanksgiving, I think Halloween, excuse me,
Oh, nice.
next week. I'm in a place where I can help a transition for the next 2 months.
Okay.
Right now, I don't see a need for a December meeting. So our last meeting of the year will be the November meeting, and then we'll move forward in January with our goals. I do know that we have breezeway policy we want to dive into with Trevor. We also have an appeal by the owners of HR 1606, the new house in Kenema that was just approved last week. They are going to be requesting that the City Commission remand the application back just to talk about the breezeway. If that would be done, it'd probably be in the November meeting.
Okay.
If the City Commission chooses not to allow the remand, they will be coming back with a separate modification request, most likely in January, to talk solely about the breezeway, either case.
Wow.
They really want the breezeway. So they have a proposed refined and reduced breezeway that they'd like to present to the board in either
That was the
a
one that was
remand.
rather,
So they have a new version that's smaller
okay.
and less roofy.
Wait, it had a big center mass, and they're reducing the center mass as
You're
well?
reducing the height.
The overall height
of the
of the-
roof. Yeah,
Okay.
connecting the two. Pretty much to the minimum a breezeway one can have and still have a breezeway.
Okay.
And so they will be coming back either through the remand process, which will be the November meeting, if the City Commission allows that. The reason that there's these two processes is there's two fees. The Historic Review Board, by our city code, as for many reasons, has enshrined that Historic Review Board appeals are only $50, and a modification would be half the price of the $1,000, would be $500. So they're kind of moving forward for this. They had a family emergency that night in October and were not able to contact me or give any heads up. So that is kind of why they're asking for the remand, because if they were there that night, they said that they would have requested a continuance, most likely.
Oh, okay.
That answered the question I had.
Yeah. So it's up to the City Commission which way they want to allow the breezeway question to come back to the board, either through a separate modification, which means that the application goes through, it is a final decision, and if they want to come back for a modification of that, they can. If it's the remand, it'll come back just for the thing they appealed, which is the breezeway. So nothing else in the notice for the a non-appeal item can be discussed with the Historic Review Board. So it's just condition of approval number 9 is the
Okay.
only thing that would be sent back. We will find out next Wednesday.
Excellent.
That's all I have.
Can I ask, Jonathan? I was surprised you didn't say anything with the design advice. Was there something on the back of your mind? Did I cut you off?
No, most of my concerns were related to how the siding of the house had to do with massing, and you basically provided all that input. So
Okay.
I was asking a question about the topography of the site because it wasn't clear in the drawings how the topography was impacted. So because it's still not clear to me exactly how that driveway works without a more detailed topographical drawing comparing pre and post. So
And Christina, please let them know that we talked about this after
I will.
left. Okay.
I will.
It's at 22 after, so 23 minutes after
so
the
but
meeting
I don't
started.
think that comment impacts the advice that were given to them.
Yeah, but I'll make sure that those comments were still in the record.
I mean, I would suggest that they be very, very clear in their drawings when they bring back the application that that's easy to understand.
And then so you had a breezeway last time. Is that a new trend? I mean, it seems odd that all of a sudden.
Sure. I think the 2006 design guidelines, they were written for the whole city. We did have different chapters for both districts and landmarks and for all situations ever that could exist and all different topographies and site locations. So I think in certain places in the design guidelines, it tries to further direction. The existing breezeway provides a lot of openness to the comments in there. So there has been kind of not clear direction by the board about when breezeways are more appropriate or less appropriate, or is it massing issue? Is it siting context? Is it massing of the existing buildings? Are we connecting it to the rear? Is it so some of those?
How it's being used. And,
So what I'd like to have on a staff level is really a work session where we can look at lots of different photos of breezeways, lots of different precedents. How is it? When was it? Is this related to a breezeway that's connecting? Is it a hyphen that's connecting an old building to a new building, like an addition? Is this a breezeway for new construction, like we had last month? How are different ways the board would see an appropriate use of breezeways, and when do you start seeing not appropriate use? And then that allows myself as staff and applicants to come in to understand, where they fit in that larger piece. And I do know that the board in 2013 is a different board than we have now, and so I may be getting different direction because this section of the design guidelines are a little more vague.
Because wasn't that addressed when they did the Atkinson Church?
That's true, and so I think the difference is, I think it's assumed that using a hyphen breezeway to connect new and old buildings is a Secretary of Interior standards.
Right.
When it's new construction and you're connecting the main body of the house to the garage, oftentimes what was found in last month was that it just really tied the massing of the two buildings together in a place that made a bigger massing, especially when you were on the hillside lot.
Right.
And so, and because that house was a larger house. And so it to me, on a staff level, I always know kind of the black and whites on both sides of the sideboards, but it's all this gray area in the middle that I know on my level, when I read those design guidelines, I don't quite know how to give direction to staff.
The actual square footage of living space between last month's house and this month's house is very minimal, like under 100 square feet. They're about the same size. The difference is that last month's house is long and narrow, so that it presents from the road a much longer
mass
appearance.
So
here's a picture of it, Claire.
So it's context, right? So we say a lot of
There's
historic
one
review
across
is
from,
context related.
Yep.
We write design guidelines to help the layperson understand context, but I think we might be able to provide even more context in relation to breezeways. I do know most likely our city commission will really like the historic review to dive into this if we keep having appeals that go up for breezeways. In the last round, the breezeway was approved in the 4th Avenue house in 2013, and then actually it was removed by the city commission. So there was definitely a discussion about that specific design, and if that specific design was appropriate to have breezeways. But there will always be other unique cases and unique lots. So
Sure.
it's tying kind of what we know and that general findings to help an applicant.
For the record, I'll say that back here we're looking at HR 1606, the applicant's submittal for that in the drawings. The interesting thing about this submittal, in my opinion, is that this is a true 1.5 with a basement, whereas what we looked at today appeared significantly taller when you look at the back elevation.
And, because this may come back to remand, I'd like to cut this discussion just so we don't have deliberations outside the,
Okay.
because if this may come back. So,
Okay.
but that's just more of a heads up that most likely what you'll see next month will be the continuation of this application and maybe the remand. Right now, I don't have anything. I know Mr. Saggs is in the audience. There may be at some point the design advice for the cottage housing proposal at the intersection of 4th and Miller. So kind of
4th and Miller.
one
Where is
behind
that?
4th. We're actually 5th and Miller, between 4th and 5th and Miller.
In
Between
Kenema?
4th and 5th on Miller.
Okay, you've got this house.
Okay, I will.
So, yeah.
I will Google it when we're done here.
So we will, but that's not on for the hearing tonight. But
Okay.
that's all I have.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for showing up today. We are adjourned.